Welcome back to the YouTube channel. Jacko here, and I'm very excited today to give you a special little insight because I've been training extremely hard. Some of you will have been following along on Instagram and seeing, because there is a week-long challenge coming up that involves not one but two marathons. Yes, two marathons a day, hopefully one in the morning, one in the afternoon/evening, depending on how fast we can go, for an entire week. We're calling it Mission Wales, Recon In-possible, not impossible, in-possible, because we're changing our perception of what inside of us is possible. This video is going to officially announce the details of what that week-long challenge is, and importantly, I want to help to go through the lessons that I've learned during the process of training for this, as well as a little insight into what training has been like, my philosophy of the way I think about how I'm going to train for these types of challenges, and hopefully some of the metaphors that we learn from these running events, how they translate into our real everyday lives and how we overcome challenges in an endurance event, what we learn from that and what that teaches us about how we apply those lessons to the real challenges in our real lives. That's personally what it's all about for me. Firstly, then, let's set out what this actual challenge is. It's called Mission Wales because we were going up the entire length of Wales on the west coast. So we're going to be starting in the southernmost westerly point, St. David's Head, on Monday, the 1st of September. So as I record this video now, that's less than a week. It's a little bit frightening as it is exciting. We'll then hopefully get us all the way up to the north at Caernarfon Castle, which is just a stone's throw away from where I live here, just on the edge of Snowdonia. And that will be on Saturday, the 6th of September, if we can average those two marathons a day for those 6 days. There's a total of around 288 miles. It works out to be just over 11 marathons and something like 13,600 meters of elevation across that week. That's equivalent to going up Snowdon 13 times or up Mount Everest 1.5 times. So it's a fairly bananas challenge, but it is just a recon. Mission Wales is Recon In-possible because it is actually, and this is a little sneaky thing that not many people know, this isn't the main event. The main event is next year, and you'll learn more about that later, but this is a test week of can I do a week-long, 2 marathons a day for multiple days, because something much bigger is coming next year. Next week is this challenge. So we're testing out our physical, our mental ability to be able to run those 2 marathons a day, for it to be sustainable for an entire week, not just to be able to do this week, but because next year, Mission In-possible, the full shebang, is going to require a very sustainable model for multiple days, and not just multiple days, multiple weeks, and actually months, but more on that later. We'll look at the why before we then go into look at my philosophy on training and give you a bit of an insight into what some of the training has looked like from a conditioning perspective, a resilience perspective, a strength perspective, and some of the things that I utilize around breath training to help with the training capacity, but also very importantly with the recovery. So the why of the challenge, I guess there's two components to it. One is I have this long-standing inner belief that we're far more capable than we allow ourselves to believe, and we need to commit ourselves to challenges like this, or I feel called to commit myself to challenges like this to bring out the best in me and actually bring out more within me than I previously thought was possible. And what are the lessons I'm going to learn along that journey that I can then apply to my everyday challenges of everyday life and living, and turn up in life for those around me, particularly Mrs. J, #1 supports crew camper van driver, and she's not particularly happy about that. So I've got to turn up in a better place. But I want to be a better person because of the lessons, because of the journey when I land in Caernarfon on the 6th of September. The other thing, and the real driver behind this, is the two brain injury charities that I'm supporting, Headway UK and Head for Change. They're two brain injury charities that help people and their families that have been affected by brain injuries. I had my own traumatic brain injury that ended my rugby career in 2013, and I've been fortunate enough to make a very good recovery, a recovery that allows me to try to push myself, my system, my mind, my body during events and challenges like this, so that I can raise awareness and also raise funds for these very important charities. A lot of people, and I've done fundraising for these charities with some previous events, and been and visited people at Headway UK, for example, where people don't make, not all people make the same type of recovery as I have, and people's lives are completely changed forever. And it's not just the individual that's had the brain injury, it's the family, the support network, the loved ones around them whose lives are also changed. So I'm doing this for them because I've been fortunate enough, and I'm grateful to be able to do these challenges and do this for those that can't. In the description below, there is a Just Giving link. So if you would like to, or feel compelled to, or want to support financially the charities, Headway UK and Head for Change, there's a link in the description below for the Just Giving page for the Mission Wales Challenge. Anything that you can support with, I am extremely grateful for. If you're the type of person that's like, I'll donate to the charity, Jacko, but once I've seen how you're getting on, I want to see your progress, and I want to see you get to Caernarfon. And if you're miles away from the west coast of Wales and you can't get there, don't worry. But the beauty of the internet, the beauty of a tracking system, there is a link below for a tracking link that will be live come Monday morning, where I'll be setting off about 7 a.m. on the 1st of September, and you will be able to track me the entire route up across the whole west coast of Wales until Saturday the 6th of September. Hopefully we get there, Saturday the 6th of September into Caernarfon. So the tracking link is in the description below, and you'll see me on the map, and you can track and see how far that we go and where we get to along the way. So I appreciate any support that people are going to put into that in terms of actually following along. You might think it's a bit odd, but to know there's people following along and checking in on you and where you are. You can actually send messages on that little web page that tracks as well. So grateful for all that support that I know people will be showing. So I've explained a little bit about my philosophy of like why I'm doing this, in terms of there's lessons that we learn during endurance events like this that we can apply to our everyday lives, and events that I've done like this before, where two of the big lessons that I've learned that applies really well into everyday life is when we look at the entirety of a challenge like this, and I think, crikey, I look at it on a map, I got to run from there in the south like to there, and that's 11 marathons, and I've never done anything like this before. This is more than twice as far I've ever run in an event or in a challenge before. Like, when I look at the entirety of it, I don't know if I can do that. I feel overwhelmed by it. And this is something I've been through a process before with the Ring of Fire, which was the first multi-day, 3-day event that I did 3 years ago, back in 2002. And that there's things, challenges and things that happen in life that when we look at the entirety of it, or when we feel overwhelmed by a challenge or a situation, just looking at the entirety of it feels like too much. So breaking it down into chunks, breaking it down into simpler steps, it sounds really obvious, but it makes such a difference. And then you focus on, right, what is just the next chunk or the next step that I've got to take in this puzzle? And when I put these little chunks together, they're going to get me to where I'm trying to get to, or trying to achieve. So for me specifically with this challenge, it's about breaking marathons down into 10k chunks. Now, a marathon is 26.2 miles. It's actually about 42 kilometers, but I'm averaging down and rounding down, and that may come to bite me in the arse later, but we'll see. Roughly speaking, about 4 10k chunks. I've got to do that in the morning, and then I've got to do it in the afternoon. And one thing that's interesting is that at any point, you can't run your second 10k chunk until you've done your first one. You can't run the second marathon in the afternoon, in the evening, before you've run the first one. So all I've actually got to do is ask myself the question of, can you go and run a 10K? And I know the answer to that question. I can run a 10K. And I've been building up my ability to run multiple 10Ks throughout a day, but training them very specifically like that. I've done some half marathons, I've done some full marathons in my training, but it's never been in that sort of capacity in terms of like if you look at my Strava data, when you see a marathon day, you'll just see 4 10K chunks, because I'm stopping the watch, I'm going through the process, I'm just trying to do one 10K at a time and getting the mind ready for that and getting the body used to having a 10K chunk, resetting, go again, and just do one 10K chunk at a time. They're the steps or the chunks that I'm breaking this down into, and that is the process and the plan that I have in place that I feel like I can trust based on training history and proof that I've shown to myself. I can comfortably run a 10K in less than an hour. So when we add on all of the stops and the terrain and the elevation and everything, you know, even if I'm running those 10Ks, running, walking, jogging in an hour and a half, I can still do 4 10Ks in 6 hours. If it takes me 6 hours twice, that's 12 hours. I know that 12 hours, if I start at 7 in the morning, plan is to have like an hour break for lunch. So if my 7 in the morning till 1 p.m, hour lunch, 2, start again at 2 till 8, have dinner, go to bed. I know that that can be a sustainable model that we can rep out day after day after day after day to complete our full week. But at any one point, we're not looking at the whole thing, we're just trying to get that one 10K done. So let's look specifically at some of the training that's been going on, trying to give you a bit of an insight into how on earth do you train for 2 marathons a day. One of the things that I love about this is that there's no textbook that you don't just put into Amazon like, training for 2 marathons a day for a week, and that something pops up. That there is no textbook for this. So I like to experiment on myself, work it out and try to come up with a plan, test the plan, roll it out, and then see how we get on. And you're going to have to learn from those potential mistakes that you make during, and then try to apply them to the next thing that we're going to try to go and do and achieve. So as I said, this one itself as a test week is a recon, so there is something bigger coming. That said, the main focus of this particular training block, which has been the last probably 3 or 4 months post the Ultra Trail Snowdonia 100K, which again went through a training process, had a plan, delivered on the plan in the event, and learned a lot along the way that I'm applying into this one, and built a real good base level of capacity to do more than 2 marathons in a day with that 100K Ultra Trail Snowdonia. This most recent block being specific to trying to do those 2 marathons a day by design, a process of like, how comfortable can I make a decent time for a 10K? So I've got a little 10K loop around where I live that gets about 200, I think 250 meters of elevation. So not too crazy, but some decent elevation, a little bit of road, quite a lot of trail on the sort of foothills of Snowdonia, and doing various different training times for those 10Ks, trying to build up capacity to be able to do multiple ones. So can I do one and then back it up, and doing it within a decent time. So the longer those 10K chunks take, the longer the day is going to spread out, the more time on feet is just going to be exhausting. But at the same time, trying to run, you're not going to be trying to run like 10K PBs whilst we're out there on the west coast of Wales trying to back up 2 marathons a day for 6 days. So there's this fine line between like not going too fast and burning yourself out, but equally not going too slow and just grinding out this whole day, because you're going to then eventually lack sleep. And one of the things I said about this recon, this week recce, is that it needs to be sustainable. So it can't be like just walking the entire second marathon because you've absolutely shot your load in the morning and you're walking until midnight, and then you're getting a terrible night's sleep, you're not going to recover. It's not going to be sustainable. So an emphasis on capacity, being able to recover and churn out multiple 10Ks. Part of that, building up strength, because the elevation is going to require a significant amount of like calf, glute, quad, hamstring strength to be able to go up and manage the downs. When you have 13,000 meters of elevation, you've also got that descent going down. That's going to smash your quads and your knees. But I'm used to the mountains from some of the racing we've been doing around here. So I'm hoping that I've built up some resilience in that. But there's some specific strength work that I do to build up the strength of the quads, of the glutes, of the calves, Achilles and ankles. And also within that is trying to build up some resilience. One of the number one things that's going to railroad this type of challenge is if you get injured. So with a trail, coastal path sort of route, you know that the footing is not going to be easy. Building up resilience around the ankle, around the calf, around the hips is going to be really important to stay injury-free and nice and resilient, so that we can actually get through to the end of this thing in a sustainable fashion. So I'm a big fan of things like lunges, walking lunges, forwards, backwards, side, whole variety, trying to build up strength and resilience around that whole lower limb. There's a lot of work that I do with trying to build up strength in the calf. One of the things that I really like to use is a block like this that gives us that incline, so that when we're working through some range in the calf, we're getting an extra stretch at the bottom. A lot of the time when we're doing this volume of work of running, people will struggle with things like plantar fasciitis. So you get a real good stretch at the bottom of your calf raises when you're using something like this, and you're going to feel that through that whole big toe flexor, through your plantar fascia, through your calf, Achilles, having some variations with the knee straight and the knee bent, so that you're targeting both gastroc and soleus. When the knee is bent, you're going to get lower down. That's going to target soleus, which when you're doing a lot of work uphill and down, particularly on the uphill, that soleus is going to take a real hammering. So I try to make, not all, but some of my strength work here in the gym specific to some of the tasks or the terrain or sort of incline and gradient that I'm going to be running on. As well as strength, we're trying to work on a little bit of speed, a little bit of power. So there will be some plyometric exercises in my week, a lot of jumping movements, trying to get some good contact time on the floor, building up again a little bit that resilience in the calf, Achilles, and trying to build up the volume of some of those plyometric movements. Very simple things, but things that are going to try to help build up a little bit of like that bounce into your step that's going to get absolutely hammered out of you by the time you're on marathon 6, 7, 8 or 9 or whatever it is in the week. So trying to build up some capacity in that type of contact time as we're hitting the floor and being able to rebound, hopefully helping with that resilience around the calf, Achilles, but equally an ankle, but equally also helping to like try and be a little bit more explosive, try and be a little bit faster, a little bit more powerful, so that ultimately if I can run a decent or better 10K time when I'm max, my like 50% effort for a 10K is going to feel an awful lot easier running like still sub 60 minutes or sub 50 minutes for a 10K. So some of the work, which is something I haven't done as much of before, a mistake I think that I've made before is just not actually working enough on any speed and trying to increase my time, because I've always been focused on like just being able to try and do a greater volume or greater amount of work volume distance, whereas I think that's been a little bit of a mistake in the past. So there's been a lot more interval type of work where I'll be doing things like going around and doing my 10K, but doing like minute on, minute off of like higher intensity pace, lower intensity pace, higher intensity pace, lower intensity pace. There was one particular session that I did last week. It was one of my peak sort of sessions where we did 4 10Ks throughout the day, so a broken marathon. And every 10K, I had to try to go a little bit faster on each one. So I think we did like a 57, relatively super easy, like to start with for the first one. Then we did like a 56, a 54, and then I think a 52-minute 10K towards the end, which for me at the end of a marathon, being able to go at that type of pace, the final kilometre, I was running at about a 20-minute 5K pace, so I was really gunning for it. It was almost like a PB 5K pace at the end, and that was me proving to myself that I've built up the capacity, but the capacity to actually run and move well at the end of a marathon. And that's, I'm not going to be trying to do that at all when I'm on the actual challenge itself. But that ability, knowing I've got that in the locker, knowing that I can go faster, means that when I'm out there just trying to sit at a nice regulated pace, that easy regulated pace should feel significantly easier than if I find it difficult to run a 52-minute 10K, if that makes sense. Oh, one little thing that I forgot to mention about strength training that I utilise an awful lot with when we're trying to build up like a greater capacity with our strength work and trying to elicit a little bit more of a hypertrophy response around some of these like supporting structures around the hip, knee, ankle, is utilising some breath holding within our sets of strength work. There's been some really lovely research on the influence that hypoxic training has alongside resistance training in terms of increasing the natural amount of growth hormone as a response to that training, that we get a greater stimulus in growth hormone when we are utilizing some hypoxic work. And you need to work on your breath holding ability, but you can get quite hypoxic in your muscle tissues by doing some breath holding work alongside your strength training work. So for my calf volume, it's like I'm doing an exhale, holding the breath, and then repping out like 10, 12 calf raises whilst I'm holding the breath, working on a little bit of CO2 tolerance because you're not letting that out, but really trying to get that hypoxic response. The other thing that I've been experimenting with a little bit in this block is doing some like breath hold sprints on the assault bike you can see behind me, going like flat out big, going past that break point where you can't hold the breath anymore. So I'm maybe even doing like 20 second, 25 if I'm really pushing it, like breath hold sprint on the 25 is maybe a bit of a push, 22, 23, breath hold sprint on the assault bike, finishing the sprint off to like 30 seconds so that like I'm not trying to then like control my breathing during that period. So I had like a really high intense workload of like 30 seconds with a breath hold for the vast majority of that at the start. And the muscle, when you measure your muscle oxygen saturation, it just plummets when you're doing that type of sprint work with an exhale breath hold. And then going into some of the volume-based work, so going into my lunges off the back of that, like dropping oxygen really low in the muscle tissues. So that's been something that I've been experimenting with, and well, we'll see. I feel like from what I'm achieving in my training, the results speak for themselves, but we'll see whether it has the desired outcome next week when we're in the challenge itself. Finally, something that is always a staple, and it's actually at the beginning of sessions, is the breathing mobilizations I do to help mobilize the rib cage, help improve how the hip is functioning, and helping the body stay nice and mobile and loose. I use that before. It's the type of thing that I give to all the professional and elite athletes that I work with, where we're doing it before gym session, doing it before running session, some very specific breathing techniques or position, like breathing within certain positions to target the hips, to target the thoracic spine, and to target the shoulder, and particularly those tight hip flexors and tight glutes that we get from potentially an awful lot of volume-based work when we're running. They're things that I will use all the time that I'm training, and it'll be something that I'll use that's very simple, really effective, that I'll use when we're out on the west coast of Wales next week as a very, very simple warm-up but mobilization before going into running, to keep the spine nice and free for good posture whilst running, keep the hips nice and loose, so that, because just anyone that's ran some ultras will know that the tightness that you're going to get can sometimes be very, very restrictive, and the breathing mobilizations are something that targets that better than any other sort of stretching or things that I've previously experienced before. Finally then, the recovery element. The recovery is equally as important as the training, and most people focus their attention and their efforts on the training, but I hold these two things in equal proportion, if not like suggest that recovery is maybe even more important, because if you don't take care of your recovery, it's going to influence your ability to train well, to be able to stay injury free, as well as be able to perform in your training at the level and the intensity that you want to. So put as much effort into your recovery as you do into your training itself, and then good things really start to happen. One of the most important things to start with in terms of that is understanding your progressive overload and the volume of work that you're doing. So I've got a little bit of work on the bike that I do, I've got a little bit of work strength-wise that I do, and then a lot of work that I do running-wise. Something that I've upgraded, thanks to Coros, is my watch. That has been great for helping me track all different types of the training that I'm doing, the volume that I'm doing. It has a training load metric for you. It has a training status, and it also has good metrics for recovery. It has a specific one for recovery, but looking at sleep as well as HRV. So these are all data points that I'm able to not get obsessed about, but data points that I'm able to use to help guide and help me make better decisions in terms of what I'm doing with my training, if I need to manipulate that during a week, or be able to keep an eye on how well am I recovering compared to how the Coros thinks I'm going to be able to recover. And that's a nice little game to play of, like, if I use all of my breathing techniques, all of things like red light therapies that help with recovery, ice bath, sauna, how much better can I recover than the technology is estimating that it thinks that I'm going to recover is. That's quite a nice game that I like to play with myself. And truth be told, I won. Last hard session I did, I think the Coros said I've got 52 hours till full recovery, and I was back to 98% recovery after one day, after 24 hours. So and then even at 98% recovery, it said you needed another 2 hours, I think, something like that. I'd have to check the data, but it took me less time to recover when I utilised red light therapy, breathing down regulation protocols that I'll explain, and then hot cold therapy with the sauna and ice bath, and then making sure you're taking care of your circadian rhythm with your good quality sleep and reducing light in your bedroom and things like that, so that you can actually get good quality sleep. With my running volume, there's a very simple periodization 4-week process that I typically tend to follow. This is something that we've used with athletes working as a strength and conditioning coach for the last, like 10 years, where we, over a 4-week period, have a 3-week load and then a 1-week slight deload, and just try to make my progression go up, 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 slightly down, up, 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 slightly down. So we have this like 3-week gradual increase, a slight deload week where we get a little bit of rest, recovery, and then we go again, and we're trying to see this progression going over those times, up, 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 slightly down, up, 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 slightly down. So eventually over a 3-4 month period, we've gone from running comfortably, for me it was something like running like 40, 50k a week, up to my peak weeks of 110, 120 kilometers a week. But it was a very slow, gradual process where every 3 or 4 weeks there was a slight deload week, and it just took us on a general trajectory gradually upwards in a progressive way, so that we're not having these sudden like spikes, or when we do a rest week, just drop off a cliff. Any big spikes up or too bigger spikes down is when typically people suffer with sort of those niggles and those injuries, because we're just changing our loading volume by too much in any one period. So something that's been staple for the last 10 years for me is a very simple 4-week periodization process, where you gradually increase progressively over 3 weeks, slight deload week in week 4, and then gradually build your way up again. And roughly speaking, trying to like increase by like 10-20% max at a time. So you're not trying to jump from like, oh, I did 50k last week, I'm going to jump up and do like 80k this week, and then I'm going to jump to 120k this week. No, build up slowly and progressively, allow the body to adapt, take care of all your recovery protocols, and you'll see a nice smooth transition, making sure that you do have some genuine deload weeks. That doesn't mean do nothing. That means reducing the volume of work that you're doing, potentially reducing also the intensity you're doing, so that the body gets that chance to rest and recover, but it's not just completely dropping itself off a cliff. Let's go very specifically into recovery then. Recovery comes in two parts for me. There is how well am I staying regulated during my actual training? And then the second part is what's my post-training recovery like? So I've got those two things. Let's start with that first one. During my actual running, I know that I'm trying to do 8 10Ks each day for a week or for 6 days. So each 10K itself has got to be nice and sustainable. I want to run it at a decent pace. I'm not out there all day, but it needs to be sustainable. I need to be able to stay well regulated. I know from previous experience when things get hard and get tough and your mind starts playing tricks on you and you feel like giving up, you feel like you can't do it anymore, and you start thinking about the entirety of the whole thing, our ability to stay focused, stay calm, is very much dependent on how well I can stay regulated in my nervous system. My nervous system and my breathing are interlinked. If I'm in control of my breathing, I can help regulate my nervous system. If you're not in control of your breathing is controlling you. So one of the most important things for me when I'm trying to do these multiple 10K chunks in a day and in a week is being able to stay regulated with my breathing rate whilst I'm actually running. One of the things that helps to do that is nasal breathing, because we're not trying to run at PB pace. So being able to run nasally, tongue up, breathe back, utilize your diaphragm so the breath is deeper, slightly slower, is more efficient in terms of oxygen extraction at the lungs. Plenty of data and research out there on that, showing that we can be more efficient with how oxygen is extracted at the lungs, depending on mechanically how we ventilate. I cover this in great detail in my book that's coming out with Bloomsbury in March 2026. So, I've handed that in, so it's them now. Look out for that in March 2026. So the how you regulate your breathing rate is going to be really key to that. The other thing that can help when you feel like, say we've got some inclines coming, there's something that's making me work a little harder. A little tip that I like is turtle power, where you wrap the top lip around your top teeth. Keep the tongue still to roof mouth, and then keep that mouth together by keeping some tension across your nostrils with the tongue wrapped around that top set of teeth that you've got. Helps keep the nostrils nice and wide and open, compared to if I have my mouth relaxed and breathing strong when I'm trying to get more air in, because I'm going up, say, an incline, my nose wants to collapse in on itself. So keeping some tension, I call it turtle power, because I think you look like a turtle. Mrs. J, Jacko, Mrs. J, Mrs. Jacko, Mrs. Joycey, aka the goat, she tells me, aka the wife, she says it's not a turtle, it's a tortoise. Anyway, I like turtle power. I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You look like a turtle or a tortoise. Wrap your top lip around your top teeth. In my VO2 max testing at Salford University, we see that we got a 26% increase in total ventilation per minute when we went to turtle power compared to just normal nasal breathing. So you can get potentially more than a quarter or so air through that nose when you keep those nostrils nice and open with turtle power. So there's a little freebie tip from me. The other thing that helps with pacing is syncing breathing, inhales and exhales, to our steps. It's called respiratory locomotive coupling. This relationship between coupling or syncing our breathing rate with our step rate. Something that I know from some of the testing that I've done is that if I'm breathing at 4 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4 steps on the inhale and 5 steps on the exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I know that I'm staying in zone 2. Knowing that I'm staying in zone 2 is very important for me to be able to make these 10K chunks sustainable. So the breathing with my steps is something that I utilize to help pace me, but also when we inhale, our diaphragm wants to move down and flatten out. When your foot hits the ground, those ground reaction forces have like the pulling down force from gravity on your body and on your diaphragm on the inside. What we see in the literature from studying elite athletes naturally, well, we actually don't know whether it's natural, whether it's trained, but elite athletes have their breathing synced with their steps, and when their foot contacts the ground at the end of their exhale, when the next inhale comes, when the next step comes to the next inhale, bang, the foot strikes the ground as the diaphragm is contracting. And that helps give the diaphragm almost like a little bit of free energy, in that those ground reaction forces are helping pull that diaphragm down, so your diaphragm doesn't have to work quite as hard when you sync your steps with your breath. The other thing that's highlighted in the research, well, there's a few things highlighted in the research around this respiratory locomotive coupling, but one that I definitely feel is this hypnotizing effect when you get you count your steps and and you get into a rhythm with your footsteps and your breathing. It sort of mesmerizes you into flow state, and you just glide along. It's something that it has all of the ingredients for accessing flow state. It's a simple task which gives you immediate feedback, and when you're trying to match that breathing cycle with those steps, and every time that you get boom, boom, that step in sync with your breath, you get that little bit of positive feedback of like, I'm doing it. And yeah, it's something that, interestingly for me, I tried many years ago and didn't like it. Came back to it a year or so ago, and yeah, have since fell in love with the different elements of it. One, it helps you get into flow state. Two, it helps our breathing be more efficient. And three, it can help regulate our pace. And I've worked out for me in some of my testing in the laboratory up at Salford University, as well as some of the testing that I'm able to do here with some portable devices that I've got for things like muscle oxygen saturation and breathing ventilation data, that when I've got a nice 4-step inhale, 5-step exhale, I know I'm in zone 2. And that's been pretty stable across the board, and that's going to be something that I use to keep myself well regulated as I'm going through these 10K chunks throughout the 8 that I've got to do each day. And being able to stay regulated throughout the day, in theory, means, in terms of getting down regulated for better recovery and sleep at the end of the day, the theory and my hope is that I won't be getting so stressed that I'm like way up here, that I can stay a little better regulated throughout the day. So my down regulation at night, where I'm going to be doing, my favorite for this would be like the gentle, calm nasal breathing on the inhale, and then humming on the exhale, which helps to innervate the vagus nerve where it passes through the voice box, so the vibrations from the humming do that. Because that vagus nerve is a key nerve for our nervous system, for our parasympathetic side of that, which is key to our rest and digest and recovery state. So being able to stay well regulated with breathing, helping the nervous system throughout the 2 marathons during the day, so there's less distance to come down. And then it's pairing my down regulation breathing with red light therapy is my favorite sort of thing. Red light therapy is something I've used for pre-COVID, so it's more than 6 years, maybe 7 years. Red Light Rising is someone that I've worked with for all of that time. They've got this amazing product for us for when we're doing these events in the van. So these wraps that go around, you can literally strap them around your calf, Achilles, which are the key areas for me, and do my down regulation breathing. And they're portable, they're flexible, they charge up via battery from just a USB, so I can have it in the camper van, charge it up, and use some really, really great recovery tools with Red Light Rising on the go, which that was something I've used so much in my recovery for training. The red light therapy combined with the down regulation breathing, that one of my concerns was like I wouldn't be able to take something like that on the road, because what I've got at home is like the big stack that's like plugged into your 240 volts, yeah, you can't take that in a camper van, and you certainly ain't going to have enough battery on on your car and your leisure battery to be able to charge that bad boy. So very grateful for the support from Red Light Rising for the quality products they make, but actually particularly this portable battery powered one that I can take with me on the road. I've literally come back from runs, put those things around my calf and ankle and Achilles, and literally been stood in the kitchen making my little recovery shake. So they're so usable and very easy to integrate into your recovery protocols. And if you wanted to take advantage of those, the Red Light Rising guys are very kindly gave me a discount code to share with you. So the code JACKO, J-A-C-K-O, all capitals, gets you 15% off any of the Red Light Rising products. And I can highly recommend anyone that's doing stuff on the go, these wraps or the full stack if you've got something set up at home. Link will be in the description for all of those codes. As most of you know, I like to run in Vivo barefoot shoes. I have done for, crikey, last 5 or 6 years. I like to feel connected to the floor. They've recently brought out this. Well, this is actually a prototype. I ran the 100k UTS in this prototype. It's for the Primus Trail Flow. And this bad boy, you can see I put her through the through the mincer. Did the 100k UTS in these bad boys. They have done over 1,500, so 1,500 kilometers or so in these. We've got a little bit of wear and tear on the sole, and it's starting to get a little bit of wear and tear around the upper, but not too bad for 1,500 kilometers. I since have got, and this is what I've been running in, that was the prototype. This is the real deal in this beautiful we'll call it lilac colour. These have done a few hundred kilometers in training for me, and I've been wearing this exact pair. Also just had the postman come, yes postman, and deliver another fresh pair, because I'm going to be doing, this is an actual, so this is, let's do a little comparison. You've got there, you've got Liverstream, worn out, used, but still usable, 1,500 kilometers. There you've got brand spanking straight out of the box. And then here we've had few training, decent few weeks of training runs in these. The nice thing about these Vivos is that they don't really take any wearing in. Like, it's not like I'm worried, I never get blisters. Nice big toe box, so you've got nice space. The Flow has like a tiny 3 mil of foam to just so when you're on those trails that your feet aren't going to get smashed to pieces. So from all the little rocks and things that you're going to have. Nice tread on these, and you can see the tread staying clearly on this. So I'm going to be wearing these two puppies, not different colours at the same time, but I'm going to rotate. So I'm going to have a pair for the morning marathon, a pair for the afternoon marathon, keeping things fresh, and rotate between those. One of the things that people don't like about running in barefoot shoes is that, like, your calves and Achilles are going to take a little bit more of a hammering if you haven't got the same amount of cushioning as you might do on like your big hockers, etc. For me, it's been a real eye-opener when I started running in Vivos 5 or 6 years ago. I need to work on the strength of my feet, the strength of my Achilles, the strength of my calf, particularly soleus, so that they can withstand like actual running. So for me, running in something like this, yeah, it might feel harder at first because you're used to so much cushioning, but there's a lesson in there of, well, I need to build up my own strength. So that's something that is a big part of, or has been a big part of my training, continues to be so, working on some foot, ankle and calf Achilles strength in the gym to prepare me for what we do out on the course itself. Then I get to run in a shoe that feels light, flexible, I feel connected to the floor, and there's not 2 inches of foam in between my nervous system and my foot actually striking the floor, because I want to feel what the floor is like underneath me, and I want my nervous system to get that immediate feedback rather than a dumbed down or dulled down bit of feedback being interrupted by a couple of inches of foam. And if you want to get yourself a fresh pair of Vivos like these bad boys, then code JACO20 gets you 20% off your Vivo Barefoot. Link will be in the show notes below. JACO20, all capitals, 20% off. And remember, with Vivos you get a 100-day return on them. So if you try them for 99 days and don't like them, you send them back and you get a full refund, no questions asked. But you won't be sending back these bad boys. These are the Primus Flow Trail, hands down the best barefoot trail running shoe I've ever worn. And more than that, the best trail running shoe that I've ever ran in. Hands down. So give them a try.